It all began with rose mauling, the beautiful folk art that comes from Norway and goes back to the 16 and 1700s. I've always wanted to go to Norway, to see it in the churches, and to see it where it began. And my dream came true on July 3rd, 1996. Travels and adventures to Norway, Sweden, Denmark. It was a great adventure for us, a first time going on a 747 jet over the ocean for 7.5 hours and landing on the other side. It was a very exciting experience and a long-awaited one. Our bags are packed. We left early in the morning up to Mark's, and they're in Shakopee, and we met Molly and Alice, who were going along. Molly is Bud's sister, and we were off that day at 3:30 on a 747 jet going on an adventure that would take us for 14 days into the Scandinavian countries. Here's Ron, our son, driving us to Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport 2 hours early. Liftoff time was 3:30 p.m. in the afternoon. I was one excited girl. Molly's and Alice's friend were ready for takeoff. Lots of room aboard the 747 jet. Bud kind of liked to wander around a little bit. Up on these screens we could see as we across the ocean, we could see when we were over Iceland, and we could see our progress. They give the statistics about how high we were and how many miles we had left and all that. It was rather interesting. It took us a little over 7 hours to cross the ocean. We landed in Amsterdam. This is one of the planes that we took from Amsterdam to Stockholm. We had a 3-hour layover there. Here's the 747 jet that we took over there. It was a KLM flight, and they'd pass candies in these little boxes, and we had a lot of candy off and on. They were always feeding us things. We had like pop, and we had lunch, and we had rolls, and it was really a nice trip. This was a new experience to us. We were on the plane, and they would give us washcloths to freshen up with on our face and our hands. And so one of the gals next to me said, "You better keep those, because you're not going to get any more in Scandinavia. They don't use washcloths." So I took her advice and took it along with me, because I guess they throw these away anyways. Okay, we start out at Minneapolis, and then we start across the ocean. And of course there's Iceland, and then we land in Amsterdam. And then we stay there for 3 hours, and then we go up to Stockholm. And there we arrive, and we've skipped a night. We start a whole new day, and we go on tour right off the bat without even having a night's sleep. So we did take a nap on the plane. Here's our brochure for the trip. It's an agenda of the whole tour that we went on for 14 days. Here's some toilet paper. It was more like hand towels. It was really different. Here's Molly. She has a puzzled look because one of the pieces of luggage of someone else went astray, but it did get recovered a few days later. In the Stockholm airport. And here's outside the airport, and it's raining, and we aren't in Bergen. Usually Bergen, we expected a lot of rain in Bergen, but it seemed like after the trip was over, Bergen, that was pretty nice and sunny, and the rest of the places would rain off and on. Here we're waiting for our bus. Our bus has arrived, and here's a sign we can't read part of it. Here's a beautiful picture of Stockholm. It's a very beautiful city. When we arrived, we had a 3-hour tour, and it was very interesting. There's lots of water in those countries. Here's the city hall. I had to take pictures of, we went to the Vasa Museum. It's a beautiful ship that was raised up out of the bay, and on its maiden voyage, it sank. It was just too top heavy. It was a beautiful ship, but it was a strange event. Stockholm, summer of 1628, when it was being built. We stayed at the Continental Stockholm Scandic Hotel. Very nice place. All of our hotels were very, very nice. This is looking out our window of our hotel. Our first meal, fish. I like fish, but it got to be just a little too much. It was really quite a joke after a while because we ate so much fish. Our tour, really a nice group of people to go with. Here's the rest of them. Very nice. Across from our hotel there was the railroad station, and that's where we went by train across Sweden, going towards Copenhagen the next day. Here were some of the pretty paintings on the walls in the station. This kind of looks kind of Russian. Here's another one. Here's inside the station. Leaving Stockholm by train and going over the bridge. Here's another scene. And another. Beautiful cut. Now we are on a train going across Sweden on our way to Copenhagen. Here's another scene. Reminds me of Minnesota. We've crossed on our first ferry boat ride, and now we're in Copenhagen. And this ferry boat took a part of our train across the waterway. Now we're loading up on our bus to go to our hotel. Our first night we stay at Copenhagen. In Copenhagen we stay at the Admiral Hotel, which was a really neat experience. That night we went to the Tivoli Gardens, which is a great place to go in Copenhagen. Usually everybody goes there. It was at night and it was really beautiful, and they have open places like this that they have theater arts. This was a very interesting hotel. You can see the wharf is on one side, and then on the other side is where we came in. Very big place and very unique. The hallways were like this. I could go under those archways and peek out. It was very unique. They made our food in front of us at the end of the cafe. That was rather interesting. Our meal out there. We soon learned that eating was supposed to be an experience, and you ate slow and you enjoyed it. Day 4, morning walk and shopping. Wow. Molly's on her way, and there's Alice too. And it's raining, and we aren't in Bergen. Here's along the wharf, a lot of interesting sights. There's a waterway to the left there with lots of boats between the big buildings. But it's time for a pose again. It's always fun to take pictures of the children. Very beautiful children. Typical sight, music playing in the streets. And then you'd put money in that case. And they did this for a living. There are a lot of shopping streets like this. No cars, just bicycles and people walking. A lot of interesting shops. Now notice that sign, summer sale. They got sales over there too. Here are the coins we used over there. There were a lot of public squares like this, and then you could watch people, or they were selling fruit or something like that. Very interesting. I couldn't get my camera out fast enough for this, so I only got a back shot. A very strange sight. Here's another strange sight. Lots of entertainment that you could just stand around and watch. Day 4, 3-hour city tour, Copenhagen. Here's a picture of the royal family. Here's the street where Hans Christian Andersen lived. It's along the wharf that you saw earlier pictures of when we walked along there, but this is a better picture. The crown jewels are kept in this palace. Here's the Royal Guard. Here's the Stock Exchange, 1619-23, oldest building in use. Here we have a picture of the Little Mermaid. She was a lot smaller than I thought. I thought the statue was larger. Everybody was standing in line getting a pose in front of the Little Mermaid. We're still in Copenhagen. A lot of beautiful old, very old beautiful buildings. Here's the royal family's palace. There are many palaces, but they're around a huge square. And right now the royal family lives in this palace. Otherwise they occupy the different ones. Here's our tour group, and the lady to the right is our tour guide. Here's the royal family of Denmark. On our tour we went to these little cabins. They were on the outside of town. And I guess city people go out there and they stay in these little places just like we would go and stay in a cabin. It's just on the outskirts of the big city. They were really decorated and a lot of pretty flowers and a lot of beautiful colors. Here's a little Danish boy, and he looks so sad. He was all alone and he was swinging, and I asked him for a picture, and boy did he perk up and pose. Now it's time to leave Copenhagen. And now we're going on the Scandinavian seaways across the Baltic Sea and up to Oslo. Here's the ship we went on. But I had to pose with us women. Here we're coming into Oslo in the morning after a whole night of being aboard ship. It was an all-night voyage. We had a fantastic buffet aboard ship. It was lots of fish, everything imaginable, beautiful desserts, food galore. I think it was the biggest buffet I think I've ever been on. Here's another shot of it. This is day 5, and we're just beginning our Norway portion of our trip, and that's going to be for 10 days in Norway. Here's a map showing the mountainous regions. On the left is Norway, and the other part with the lakes coming into Sweden. Sweden is made up of many different islands, as you can see, and Norway has all the mountains. Actually, it's 3/4 mountains. Here's our 10-day trip in Norway. We started at the bottom at Oslo, going over to Bergen, and going way up north to Trondheim, and through the center, through Lillehammer, and then back to Oslo. We arrive in Oslo by boat on the Crown of Scandinavia. We had a great breakfast aboard ship and arrived in the harbor, ready to start our tour in Norway. Here's another shot of the ship. And here we are boarding our bus. It's a brand new bus, a very nice bus. Here is our guide. Here's a picture of our guide and our bus driver. Stein is our guide, and Leif is our bus driver. Stein is a high school teacher, farmer, and guide. Very interesting man, and lots of good humor that he brought with him on the trip. And the driver was an excellent driver. It's day 5, and we're leaving Oslo, going to the western side, and we'll come back to Oslo at the end of the trip and then stay a couple days. Here are the krona we used in Norway. Here are some pictures of the Telemark area in Norway. We still have sod roofs. Our first church, Hedal Church, largest staff church in Norway. This is where rose mauling began, and beautiful rose mauling and a lot of carvings and beautiful paintings. In Norway they have a lot of beautiful cemeteries. They're very well kept up, and this is outside the Hedal Church. Here's some rose mauling in the shop at Hedal, and here's another piece. We're leaving Hedal, and you can see there's rain on the windshield. Now we're heading to Rjukan in Telemark, and the plant where it was made. And the Nazis took over, and it would have played a crucial part in the Second World War had it not been bombed and taken care of. Here's the plant in the background. It's raining again. Time out for a pose. Here's another shot of the plant as we come in there by bus. Many of these pictures were taken as the bus was rolling along. I guess that's why I bought a lot of postcards, just in case they didn't turn out, because we many times didn't stop. I had to do it as the bus was going along. Here's inside the plant. Inside the museum there were a lot of paintings by Edvard Munch, portraying the people working hard during the wartime and what they went through. He's also noted for the picture called The Scream. I guess I'm more familiar with that one. It's raining again, and we're on our way to Vrådal. Here's the valley of Vrådal, and that's where we're going to stay overnight. End of day 5, and we're at the Hotel Strand in Vrådal. Very nice hotel. Lots of quaint old things. Lots of old rose mauling too. In the morning I had to take some quick shots to get some picture of the rose malling. Beautiful old cupboards. Here's an old clock. Notice the wood carving on the top. That's hand done. Here's a very old Cuba stool. Frodal to Bergen. Now we're on our way to Bergen, and it's day 6 and it's Monday. Here's what a lot of the houses look like along the way. They had tile roofs, and they had a lot of the detail work was the same. Here's a fjord. It's raining, but it has a mystery all its own. It's a very beautiful sight. Our faithful driver driving us along. Now we are on our way to Vinji. We're still in Telemark, and this is the Vinji Church, and it's about 200 years old. Lots of goats. We're leaving Vrodal, and we're heading towards the western side more and more, where it's getting more beautiful, more fjords, more mountains, and way in the background you can see the glaciers. Goats and more goats. Molly asked the question, do any of those goats ever fall down the mountainside into the fjords? And Stein, our guide, said, only once. The scenery is getting more and more beautiful. Looking out our bus again and traveling, we're seeing some more sights. Very beautiful mountains. We stop at a cafe, and here's the beautiful sight right beside the cafe. Looking out the cafe window, we see the same lake. Here we're having coffee in the cafe. Time out for coffee. We're all kind of looking around, looking at the old antiques, and it was a very interesting place. Here's the Kennedys up front. Bud's way back there looking at something. Here's an old cupboard. By the time we got back to Oslo, we had gone through 137 tunnels. I guess there's about 600 in Norway. There are a lot of newer tunnels now too. They have special machinery that they go through these mountains with. It's all stone. Here's another pretty sight. Sometimes people have small cabins up there. I presume that little building there is a cabin. Looks pretty small to live in otherwise. Day 6, going higher and higher. The Rodal Stav Church, day 6, was built in the 13th century. Here's another cemetery that's well kept up. Notice the mountains in the background. Here's inside the church, a lot of old carvings and beautiful rose malling. That's where the rose malling started, was in the old churches of Norway, before it went to the valleys, and then they painted furniture. But that's where it started. We're on our way again, and wouldn't you know, another short shower. Here's a falls, lots of falls in Norway. Now we're on our way to Oda. Here's another shot. You can see the glaciers in the background, and it's raining again. We're at Oda, branch of the mighty Hardanger Fjord. This was also a pretty sight. Seems almost impossible that a country could have so much beauty. It's 2:30 and we stopped at the Utni Hotel. It's day 6 and we had cakes there. It's a very old hotel, 1722. Of course, they had some more rose malling and faux finishes, which interested me very much. I got my camera out. Standing up is the waitress. Day 6 continued. Here's a picture of one of the tunnels, a shorter one. Getting ready to sail across the fjord on the ferry. Here's another one of the many falls that we looked at. There's people there walking behind the falls. I didn't walk behind the falls because that's where I bought my sweater. Now we're coming into Bergen. Click, click, click. As we come in, the bus is moving fast, and here's the harbor. Here's another shot of the harbor. The bus is moving fast and we're coming in to our hotel, and we arrive at Hotel Bristol in Day 7, July 9th, in Bergen. Here's the waterfront where they sell fish. They had salmon there. It almost looked raw, and they put on the bread and people would eat it. It really smelled fishy. And then after they were all done, this was all cleared out, and then they'd come out with power washers and wash it into the sea. Here was an old church in Bergen. Never got in. We went over there, but we just didn't get in because it wasn't open till 11 and it was only 10. Phooey. They were looking at the door and told us that. One of the gals from the tour group went with me. We were very disappointed. But it was kind of an interesting place anyways. A lot of pretty old churches. Here's day 7, and it's a city tour of Bergen. Here's the waterfront. There's a trade center there. All these buildings were close together, and it dates way, way back. Went into these different buildings, and they told us all about it. Here's down by the waterfront again. There's that building. And we went to Edvard Grieg's home. There's our tour group at his house. This is where Edvard lived. The path going up there had these beautiful trees, and it was a long trek going on this pathway up to Edvard Grieg's home. Wharf. That's in Bergen. This is the Bergen Harbor. This is our guide telling us all about the area. Here are some youth going on an excursion trip out to sea. We had a few nights that we went out on our own to eat. Most of the time our suppers and our breakfasts were taken care of, but this night it wasn't. And this turned out to be rather expensive. It turned out to be $15 a piece for lasagna. After supper we kind of went around and looked around. Here's Bud, and everybody's going down there, and we're kind of looking around down by the wharf. Bus. Lots of pretty boats. Time out for a pose. This man was very congenial. He had a nice smile, and he was very willing to pose. Here's a billboard you would never see in America, and that's why I took the picture. And here's a picture of Edvard Grieg when he was young. Here's a picture of when he was a little older and older. Day 8, July 10th, Bergen to Loen. Arriving in Voss, the Voss Church, a 13th century church. There were angels on the ceiling, lots of beautiful finishes, which are called faux finishes. Very beautiful old church. Got a picture of Walter Johnson in the pulpit. Pastor Walter Johnson. On the way to Stalheim. This is about the only time we were held up by road workers. Ascending the road to Stalheim. And this is the valley. This turned out to be quite hair-raising, and I was sure glad we had such a good driver. We're beginning our climb up to Stalheim. We go by a falls. This is the valley below, and we're starting our climb going higher and higher. Oh, here's a bus. Those roads were pretty narrow. And a little higher, the valley's getting farther and farther away. Bus is going down on that narrow road. Another bus. And another bus. It turned out to be 4 buses by the time we got done. Are we swinging around again? We're coming up. We're getting close to Stahlheim. Just about there, overlooking the valley, there was a German bunker that overshot the valley there. Here's a picture of the valley again, looking down from Stahlheim. Here's some shots in the hotel. Now we're in the fjord again. We're still on the ferry. We are nearing Kopanger. If we had turned right on this fjord and gone down another one, it wouldn't have been too far. We would have come to Ireland, where the Nasbys had their last farm before they came to America. As you noticed, on the top of the picture, looks very rocky. And this part is the town on the other side. There's an inscription on the bottom that there's a medieval church in that town. There are shoes made in Ireland, and a hydroelectric power station. This picture in a book on Norway. Otherwise, we just had no idea what Ireland looked like, and we couldn't go off to our tour to see it. In the distance, you can see glacier country. You can see this road going to a tunnel. There were 137 tunnels that we went through on our tour, and we were told there were about 600 tunnels in Norway. Lunchtime with the Kennedys. They were a neat couple. Gotta have our Norwegian gasoline, or coffee. Coffee was very expensive. It was almost $2 a cup at times. We're coming into glacier country. This glacier is in the distance yet. We're sitting still in the front seat of the bus, and we're getting a lot of good pictures. We're on to glacier country. We went to a museum, descending into Lowen, where we spent 2 days at the Hotel Alexandria. A little farther down into the town, and lower yet. Hotel Alexandria in Lowen. Beautiful pictures on the wall. Hand-woven pictures, which is an art form in Norway. Beautiful acanthus carvings, which is typical of the Gudbrandsdal style of carving. Day 9 at Lowen. Day 9. Breakfast at our hotel, at the Alexandria Hotel, and we're off exploring around again. Today we see some glaciers. Some more beautiful scenery. Lots of waterfalls. Another waterfall with a glacier behind it. Walking up to a glacier. Getting closer and closer. Time out for another pose. It was raining again. Still very pretty. Time to board the bus again. Picture of Olden. Continuing on our boat ride. Another scene on the boat ride. Briksdalen. A mountain horse. They're different. They've got thicker necks than a regular horse. Selecting our horse carts to go up the mountainside and up to the glacier. Beautiful ride up to the glacier. Sights along the way. Beautiful waterfall. The glacier of Briksdalen. Very many beautiful colors. In the evening we went up. One night we walked up to the little church on the hill that overlooked Lowen and looked on these rocks and saw the disaster that was in 1905 and also 1936. After it happened in 1905, it said that it would never happen again. A part of the mountainside fell into the fjord, and caused a huge tidal wave, and it killed many people. And he said it would never happen again, and it happened again in 1936. Here's the scar in the mountainside, looking down from the church down into Lowen. The church on top of the hill. And here's the cemetery. Here are some of the paintings within the church. On the walls. A lot of it carving and rose mauling. It's a beautifully hand-carved chair. Here's the beginning of rose mauling in the churches. Some beautiful painted pieces. Very, very old. Here's some more inside the church. There was a ship that was hanging from the ceiling. Another list inside the church of the victims. Day 10. Lowen to Mold. Breakfast at your hotel. A typical breakfast with goat cheese and meats, summer sausage, slivered salmon, herring. We saw this tube of cheese a lot. There were a lot of breads. There was scrambled eggs and some cereals, which they put fruit over. They used great big bowls and large spoons. There was always plenty to eat. Now we're on to the Geringer Fjord. Another ferry crossing. Here our guide Stein is directing traffic and getting us aboard, making sure we get across okay. Here we're crossing the fjord. There were beautiful ships in the fjords. They say that the fjords are as deep as the mountains are high, and that's why these big ships can come in there. It's raining again, but it's very beautiful in spite of it. Time out for lunch, and then we stop at a hotel that has a restaurant in it. The back of the hotel that we were at, I found another church, and I went over there to see if it was open, and it was closed. There's a graveyard. The lady has some things over the fence, and there's the mountains in the background. I need to change just a little bit. There's a beautiful lake. Always another beautiful sight around the corner. So many beautiful places in Norway. Time out for a tourist stop. A few trolls around there. Molly and Alice found one too. A troll's path, 11 hairpin turns. It was a lot scarier than what it looks like. Very narrow roads. Now we're going further north. We're near Mold. The tree that's planted here represents where the king and his son stood when Mold was bombed, and he later escaped to England during the Second World War. Looking out our hotel at Mold. Leaving Mold. Saturday, day 11, Mold to Trondheim. There is a name of a place that is called Bud, spelled just like Bud's name. And here's the bakery in Bud. Here's the town of Bud. Here's another picture. There was even a church. The Germans also had a place here. And this is in the same spot too. This is called the Atlantic Road. We're facing the Atlantic here on the way to Trondheim. Here are homes along the shore. Here's villages. Here's a suspension bridge. Here's what the countryside looked on the way to Trondheim, coming from Mold, nearing Mold. We're nearing Trondheim. This is what the countryside looked like. They still stack their hay this way to dry this way on the western side of Norway. Nearing Trondheim. Coming into Trondheim, you can see the cathedral, top of the trees, on the edge of Trondheim. Our room at the Royal Garden. We looked out our window and we could see the wharf behind us. Lots of glass. This is our room. Very nice. Sights around town. Very nice hotel. A real nice buffet. This is in the back of the hotel. Pool. Day 12. Trondheim to Røros. And we had a 3-hour tour in Trondheim before we left. A beautiful old cathedral. It was raining, but yet the pictures turned out pretty good. Another folk museum. We saw this museum as we left Trondheim. Leaving Trondheim. The only picture I got inside the museum, I took it and then I found out I wasn't supposed to take any pictures. On our way out of Trondheim still. Another church on the inside. Anno means the year 1662. Beautiful carvings. Here are some of the old buildings in Røros. Here's some more. It was raining again. This was an old copper mining town. We're going into church at Røros. Inside the church at Røros. Beautiful hand carvings. Full finishes. Which, this isn't marble, but it's full finished. Beautiful. Here's the church pulpit. Now we're down by the copper mine. Unwed mothers were delegated to this area. And then in order to make a living, they had to be prostitutes, raise their children. It's raining. We're still near the copper mine. The Germans were interested in this mine. Day 13, leaving Røros. We stayed at Røros in a hotel and we had breakfast, and now we're on our way to Lillehammer. Leaving Røros towards Lillehammer. The Valley of Valleys, Gudbrandsdal. This is where Lillehammer is. Here's the beginning of the valley. It's 125 miles long. Here's the Olympic ski area. And if you look closer, you can see the cleared out tree areas for the Olympics. We rode to the top of the ski jump. This is the one that was used for the Olympics in 1992. On top of the ski lift, on the hill, there was this shop. On top of the hill, overlooking Lillehammer, the museum at Lillehammer. The Garmel Stav Church was also there. Inside the church, here's a beautifully wood-carved door in the Gubenstahl style of wood carving, known for the acanthus sleeves. The walking street in Lillehammer, where all the shops were. Day 13, leaving Lillehammer. As we left, we saw the Olympic Arena. A closer view of the arena. The eastern side of Norway, where the farms are larger, and we're on our way to Oslo. Day 14 in Oslo. We had breakfast and then we had a 3-hour tour of the city. At Frogner Park by Vigeland, depicting the cycle of life. $650 statues. At Oslo, the largest ski jump in the world. It has been used for earlier Olympics. This was the Oslo University. Now they use it for lawyers. The Oslo University has a new site. Now it's on to the Viking Museum in Oslo. We are now in the Viking Museum in Oslo. Oslo Harbor. looking up at the castle. The graduating class of the Castle Guards. This one posed for me. This church was open, so we just walked in one evening when we were walking around. Again, a lot of pieces of beautiful antiquing and carving. Buildings around Oslo. People playing in the streets, just like in some other cities like Stockholm or Copenhagen. It was a long walk to the palace. We had pizza here, and we had an interesting experience. One of the waitresses was carrying French fries and some other things on a tray, and she left it on the table, and then she went over to talk to somebody. In the meantime, a gull came down and sat on the table and was coming close to the food. And so then, she got all excited and came over to us, and she said, "Did that gull do anything?" And I said, "No." And after she left, Bud said, "Yes, he took one French fry." We stayed at the Hotel Bristol in Oslo. It was a very elegant hotel. Our last breakfast at Oslo in the Hotel Bristol. Here's some of the furniture in the Hotel Bristol in the hallways. Beautiful hand carving. And that's the end of our adventure to Norway, Sweden, Copenhagen. It was a great trip.